This is Gem Archer, and you're listening to the StageLeft Podcast. In fucking one. Didn't ask you to write it down or anything.
Okay, welcome to the StageLeft Podcast, lifting the veil on the music industry by telling the stories of those with a unique vantage point. The podcast exists to provide free educational content for young musicians entering an increasingly complex industry by telling the stories of some of the unsung heroes behind the success. So go to the StageLeftPodcast.com for all episodes featuring the likes of Gail Ann Dorsey, Stuart Lee, Tony Visconti, Steve Cropper, Miles Copeland III, as well as members of Queen, Earth, Wind and Fire, the Smashing Pumpkins, Guns N' Roses, Radiohead and Kraftwerk, who discuss in detail their writing, recording and performing processes. Today we're joined by singer-songwriter Seye Adelekan, who, as well as writing thought-provoking reflective songs himself, has also been Gorillaz' bassist since 2016 and has jammed, played live and recorded with a countless array of jaw-dropping musicians. Today we'll be discussing how to maintain routine when travelling for so much of your work, how to find exactly the right bass sound you're looking for, youth of the apocalypse, tattoos of past projects, and which underrated skills Seye thinks that every musician must have. So it's a pleasure to say that our guest down the StageLeft Podcast is none other than Seye Adelekan. Thanks for joining us today, Seye. How's it going?
Mate, thank you so much. I'm in such crazy company. When you started listing all those people who've been on the pod, etc., I'm just like, man, I feel a bit of an imposter. But no, dude, I'm feeling really good. Thanks for having me on.
Imposter syndrome is a common theme that we have on this podcast, and why not? Let's go into that. We all have it at some point. I've got it right now, so let's just embrace it, and we'll come to it in a bit. Now, listen, you recently have been doing sessions with Self-Esteem. Wow, yeah. And you've had quite a long working relationship, I believe, with Self-Esteem. So, where did that relationship begin, and how in the studio do you get the best out of each other? Do you think?
So, I've been sort of in Rebecca's sort of ether for a long time, because actually the first band I ever toured with was a singer-songwriter called Jeremy Walmsley, now of a band Summer Camp with him and his wife, and he's just an amazing composer, writer, etc. But back then Rebecca was in Slow Club, and I think Slow Club and Jeremy Walmsley were both on Transgressive Records, and we just were on like similar tours and like sort of that sort of Transgressive Roadshow, Gonzo, MTV2 kind of NME scene. So I think we crossed paths a bunch then and knew a lot of the same people. But how we came to working together is because her producer, Johan, is a very, very dear friend of mine, Johan Hugo. He's a producer, and I was in a band with him called The Very Best. Still technically am, actually. It's like an Afro pop mad adventure band, and he's been producing us since the first record, and whenever there's a project I just go down and we just hang out, and music occurs. And I think that's actually, to answer your question, how do we get the best out of each other, it's actually a lot of the work is done outside of the studio, and just like we've just hung out a lot, we've exchanged stories, we've had good times together, we've had bad times together. I think a lot of it is to do with the environment you create, which then just encourages good music or just music to come out. When she's really comfortable, she can tap into these amazing places and feel like she can say whatever she wants. And that's actually so important, especially with her kind of music, because it's always very, very personal, painfully personal, often. And me and Johan just have we've made so much music together over the years. Like, he'll have a beat or she'll have like a melody or something, and then I'll plug my guitar in and they'll just press play. They won't even play it to me sometimes. And then I'll just start playing, and then we'll just vibe that way. And then, then she'll take it away and then write something on top of that. Or they've already got a song written, and then I come in and put some guitar or some bass down. And then we're listening back to the song, and I just start singing a harmony to the melody, and she's like, "Oh, that's really cool. Let's chuck that in." So it's all quite fluid and not quite, not super structured. But I think the main thing is the environment in the studio is often just as important, if not more important, than the actual gear that's in it.
And for musicians listening to this, it's an interesting dynamic that Self-Esteem's album, Prioritise Pleasure, it's probably one of the most important albums and empowering albums of this era. I think we remembered in that way. with following that up, like, how do you ensure that's not in your brain in the studio? Like, do you, like, yeah, you're smiling and laughing already. It's like, how do you, because I'd imagine when you recorded that previous album, that level of success was probably not unexpected, but it wasn't kind of, it wasn't what it became. So how do you then compartmentalize that when you go back into it and go, oh, it's us, it's We Gang again, but actually this time we know way more people are definitely going to listen to it.
That is the challenge. I think it's already a better album. That's just me. But I think a lot of that has to do with actually a lot of the work has been done without much outside influence, really. We're still writing in the same place with the same people. So, and I think just like Rebecca's just really has just grown. She's grown through that whole experience of having, like, she's in fact, I think she said this. She's never expected any record to kind of do anything, and it keeps growing and growing, and she's made them exactly the same way. She's always shit scared, about what she's saying and whether it's going to be received, blah, blah, and it's worked out. And I think she's still there, and I think because the process hasn't changed, it should be all right. But obviously it is different. It's a bigger deal now. But I think just trying to, again, keep things comfortable, not think about it too much. There's obviously the craft of things, and like you're thinking, I think there are grander ideas and there is a much bigger scope on this record. But I think still the incubus of the ideas and the feeling, the people around, it's all the same, and it's, I think, going to be just as authentic as the last one. I'm not in the firing line, so it's kind of a win-win for me.
Amazing. Now, you obviously in your career, you have to frequently jump between playing with lots of different musicians, and as well as being, you are a guitarist and singer-songwriter, but often on bass is kind of your thing. Mm-hmm. What's the advice you'd give to, like, quickly locking in with drummers in different styles? Like, I guess, like, day after day, you could be playing with a different drummer. And, it's often thought that, like, rhythm sections are such an important, foundation of a band. Maybe it's wrong to actually say the word foundation, but how do you best kind of jump between one to the other, sometimes day after day?
That's a very, very good question. I'm not even necessarily sure how. And I think, well, number one, you have to make sure that you're on top of things. So there's a lot to be said about just being prepared. You will have a much better chance of locking in with whoever it is. You assume that the other person is going to be doing their job as well. But that little bit of difference, I've also found, and this may be quite similar to what I was saying about being in the studio with Self-Esteem, there's something so much to be said about how you get on with someone. Like, just some of the drummers I've played with, like playing with Seb Rochford is very different to playing with Femi Colioso, is much different to playing with, like, Matt Ingram, which is much different to playing with Tony Allen. And, they're all amazing drummers and they're all quite different, but we all get on. I don't think I've had great gigs, even with amazing drummers who I don't, like, get on with. I think that's actually making an effort to connect with the person, and then the music, do everything you can. There's only so much you can do. If you learn the notes and then just lock into the moment, you should be okay. But I think the things that can help that go even further is if you try and connect with the person first. Learn the music, connect with the person. You'll have a best chance of just getting in, because you're right, like going from one player to another player to another player, it's hard, but that's also a skill. It's also repetition. And like, I started when I was 18, and professionally when I was 18, and I'm turning 36 in like a week, and it's like I've done it most days since then. So you just get better at it the more you do it. Like, no matter where you're starting from, you can just get better at it.
And what's your stance personally on this idea of how much you rehearse and when you rehearse with the band? So we had the brilliant Mike Smith on, who is, he's a legend, and he's been basically a musical director for most of Damon Albarn's projects in the past. And he said there was like an interesting situation in Good, the Bad and the Queen, where he was like, some members of the band were like, I want to rehearse this, right? And then Tony Allen was like, I know my bit.
Yeah.
Right. So what then?
That's funny. Yeah, he's an anomaly. You say yes, Tony, and crack on. And the thing about him is that even when, because he actually also had some ropey shows. Let's be honest. Like, a whole bunch of whiskey and a whole bunch of weed and no rehearsal. I mean, what can you expect? But when there was still in those gigs such moments of greatness that you couldn't even ever rehearse. So it's like, he's an anomaly. But I always say, like, there is a difference between rehearsal and practice. Like, you shouldn't be learning the songs in rehearsal. Practice is a personal thing. That's what you do on your own, like with your headphones in, like just like running the dots, learning the notes. When you get to rehearsal, that's when you're jamming it with the other people, seeing if, like, say, your tone fits with the drummer or with the other people in the band. You're discussing arrangement. You can only get to that detail if you're not like, oh, how many bars is the intro? Oh, like, especially when, say, you're in a project where there's a bit of budget and it's costing money, like serious money. You kind of need to come in with, like, at least sort of 80% of it quite ready. And that's also, it's on them as well sometimes to make sure that they give you everything you need to prepare. So I'd say to everyone, do not be shy in asking for anything you think you might need, like stems for, the BVs or for the bass parts or for the guitar parts, and what tempo is it? And, is there in fact, I just had this conversation with an MD today for something I'm preparing for in the summer. And he sent the whole band stems for different parts, but there was no bounce of like a finalized arrangement. So I just messaged saying, okay, so is the reference just what is on the CD, on the record? CD, how old am I? Yeah. Is the reference just what's on the record? And he's like, oh, snap, okay, I forgot to I'm going to send everybody the arrangement bounce, because that could also be different to what is on the record. So it's always good to ask questions if you have any. Get as much information as you can ahead of time, so you walk into the rehearsal room with as much ready as possible, and then you can mess around, and then you can chuck it all out or whatever, depending on what they want, depending on what you want to bring to the room. But practice is for yourself. Rehearsal is like collaborative. That's where you start doing work on what you've prepared before.
Absolutely love it. Now, you said you've been playing bass for 18 years. When you started playing the bass, if I was to say to you, let's say you got to the point where you're like on the cusp of, doing some really exciting things in the music industry. If I said to you then, like, what would success look like to you? Like, what would be your metric of success? What would that, what would you want to achieve and success mean? What would you have answered then, and what would you answer now?
Right, it's a good question. So it's a multi-layered one, because then 18-year-old kid, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's what I would have said would be my, zenith, playing huge shows and just partying really hard, like, and making loads of money, like, which I actually think, I've done a lot of those things, and also there are elements of those things that are actually okay. So I think one of the problems that a lot of young musicians have is that it's not necessarily that the things that they want are wrong, but I think it's more like how they want them, and to the degrees that they measure them are external. I was a success the first gig I ever played, which is like Lincoln Town Hall, to no one. It was literally bar staff and like promoter, his missus and a dog. Absolutely no one at this show, but somebody paid me 50 quid to play this gig, to play music, the thing I practiced in my bedroom, I was a success then. This is to answer you how I'd answer it now. Yeah. I was a success then. I was also a success when, playing with Gorillaz, headlining the 2 nights at the O2 or All Points East or any of these huge things that they've done. They both are just as successful to me now, because I got to do the thing that I think I'm best at doing. And then when I say I got 50 quid for it, and I got more than 50 quid for those other gigs, but it's like, I don't necessarily, I think it's noble to, because this is a job as well. And I think it's not bad to want to make money from this, I think a lot of times people try and say, almost like it's art. It shouldn't be about the money or something like that. And I'm just like, it's art, but also as a responsible adult, you have to look after yourself. And I think it's a noble thing, no matter what your job, to take care of yourself. If you can be fortunate enough to look after yourself as well as do the thing that, you're probably gifted to do, then that's great. So I think I try to compare myself less to other people nowadays. Things come and go. I've been up high. I've been very, very low. I've been up high. I've been very, very low. I've played gigs to very few people, gigs to lots of people, and then back to very few people. Like my solo music, no one knows. Very, very few people know it. I'm just restarting that again. So, I'm playing I played a show in Brighton to like 50 people as my headline solo show. And the last gig I did before that was main support at Coachella with Gorillaz. So it's like humbling myself back to doing that, but it's like, that's okay, because that's still a success to me.
What would you say to artists that have given up or thinking about giving up because they're playing in empty rooms? Because it is tempting. Like sometimes you play those gigs and it's so demoralizing. You just think, what's the point? And it's not, it's so easy to take it as like, oh, that's a reflection of the quality of my output. But there's so much more than that. It's like, probably because you're not very good at marketing. Do you know what I mean? Rather than songwriting.
Exactly. You're right. It's like, it's not, if you're happy with the music, you're happy with the music. I think that's a completely separate thing to getting people in a room. Because even if your music is the best thing, if people haven't heard it, or it's also subjective, I think thankfully it's not a reflection on who you are. Because unfortunately, there's also lots of really, really, really successful people who make terrible music. So it's clearly not just having good music that is the thing. But it is disheartening, and I think it's actually part of it. If, you've been doing it for 15 years and every single room you play is empty, there's something really, really wrong with the way you're marketing things. And that's something that you can break down. That's something you can objectively look at. And that's something that you reach out. It's clear that you need to reach out and maybe get a new manager, maybe go on a course, maybe try and reach out to a musician. I mean, reach out to me, someone listening, if you need some advice or some help on anything, or just some questions, I'll try and answer. I also think it makes sense to be like, okay, I'm going to give this a go, like my absolute all for 2 years. Give yourself like small, achievable, realistic things. It's like, if in 2 years absolutely nothing has changed, then let me reassess, and maybe I do need to step back. Maybe I do need to try and do something else while I'm recalibrating, etc. Because one of the good things about making music in 2024 is that age is becoming less and less of a thing. Like with the internet, you have access to your people wherever they are, whatever age you are. So you can have a punt at it. If it doesn't work out, it's not like you had a record deal and they spent all this money putting your CDs in a shop. It didn't sell. So now it's all gone to pot. Like you've wasted shelf space and they take your single off the shelves. It's like your music is out there forever. If you go back, work on it and come back out in like a year and a half, 2 years, things can change. They can be different. So thankfully, as an artist these days, you have a lot more time.
Good advice. Now, what you I believe you moved about quite a lot in your early years. So I think Lagos, Holland, Ecuador, London. How do you think growing up in different places equipped you for the music industry? So not just necessarily about what you picked up that went into your playing, but do you think it equipped you for the music industry and what the reality of it is by growing up in different places, or was it advantageous or disadvantageous?
I think it's probably a mixture of both. It did really get me it got me comfortable, whether I liked it or not, with being in a new place, having to make friends quickly, just wanting to fit in, because I was always the odd one out, no matter where I was. Even when I moved back to Nigeria from Holland, I looked exactly the same as all my friends, but I went to a British school in the Netherlands and had a madness accent. So I was also an outsider, even amongst quote unquote my own people. So there's something about being a bit other that kind of just got me used to being in strange places, being strange or feeling strange. But having to connect to people quickly, I think, was one of the best skills that I gained just from moving around, being exposed to new things, new people, new places, new smells, new sights. Because, if you do this, you're going to be confronted with new people all the time. Even something as simple as if you're on say like a club tour, every night there's a different, and you don't have your own like crew that you're traveling with. So you're using the in-house front of house engineer, for example. So every gig you're having to quickly connect with this person who's going to hopefully sort your sound out, making a connection, being polite, maybe reading the room, seeing how, if they look like, they've had no sleep and like need a minute, just like not being like, come on, kind of trying to play the person, be sensitive to that. Also traveling with people, which you're going to be doing a lot potentially if you do this, especially if you're on a tour. Traveling with people is hard, even the people you love the most. In fact, especially the people you love the most. Having a bit of kindness, a bit of grace, a bit of sensitivity. For example, like if you're driving like after the gig at 11 p.m, that is probably not the time to be blasting tunes, especially if people aren't in a really up for it kind of mood. I think that happened recently. I'm just like, you really need to read the room, and it's like, I don't think it's necessarily that appropriate. It gets you sensitive to other people, which again is kind of what we do. Music it's a team sport, and you're constantly collaborating. Even if you're a solo artist, your music has to probably leave your hands. Even if you write it, produce it, etc., maybe a mixing engineer does something with it, maybe a mastering engineer, or at the very least, maybe you get to a gig and you have to work with the engineers and sound people and lighting people. You want your merch to be made, so you have to interact with other people. It's all human resources. So trying to get good at communicating, connecting, being patient with people, being ready to be probably quite bored a lot of the time, especially when you're traveling, is really important.
And all that stuff makes you so employable to the next person, right? It's just
like,
100%.
Yeah. I'm not, I'll say this now. I am not the best bass player in the world. I'm pretty damn good, but I am not the best in the world. There are people who can, and a lot of my friends, in fact, out of all my friends, and I've got some unbelievable bass playing mates, I'm probably the least on paper, like technically gifted, like qualified. I've got a pretty unique sound, I guess, or a unique approach, but they can all play me under the table. But one of the things that makes me super employable is just the way I get on with pretty much absolutely everybody in every band I've ever been in and every venue I've ever played in, so it's like there's something about that. And there's also something about, I kind of, as well as just like learning the songs and being polite, etc. It's like bringing your own personal style to the songs, bringing your own personal style literally to the room in terms of what you wear. They're just little things that can, bring just a little bit of spice to you as opposed to anyone else that could potentially get it.
Nice. Now, you said in the past that you're happy to discuss this topic, but you've had an interesting journey with sobriety, which you've kind of documented on your Instagram page. And by the way, I'd really recommend everyone follow Share's Instagram page, because you often have these really great little videos where it's like, here's my top 3 bits of advice on X, Y, Z, and you really create a connection with your followers and community about what their thoughts are on exactly the same. Now, the music industry is just so connected to a drinking and drugs culture.
Yeah.
And you've gone through a really interesting journey. And I just wonder now if, we've got listeners to this who want to kind of lay off or ease off on some of the excess that they're doing, but they find themselves at after shows, or they find themselves with hours to kill before a show, and they want to have a few drinks and stuff like that. Like, how do you navigate that best? What advice would you give for both kind of before and after shows? Because that is often a culture where a lot of drink and drugs occur.
Thanks for bringing that up, because I'm all right talking about that. I'm 5 years and 1 month clean and sober. And it is hard in our industry, because you kind of grow up. I mean, I remember like playing the Tunbridge Wells Forum, my band, when I was like 14 or 15 or something like that. And yeah, beers in the fridge. It's like you just associate the whole process and the whole feeling with it. But I would say, and what I do, is try to spend as little time in the venue as possible. I don't think there's any weakness in kind of just removing yourself from a situation. It's like, if you're trying to, there's no point just like fighting, like what are you trying to prove by just like resisting? I personally, that's one of the things that I do. So after gigs, I leave as soon as possible in general. And again, during the day, it's like, even if it's a case of maybe not spending so much time in the dressing room, maybe staying in the van, if there's a van that you're in, or discovering the city, going and doing something, grabbing a coffee somewhere, get your buy out. And, if you need to take yourself off and just do a little explore yourself, then just do that. Because there's so much boredom, and that's actually where a lot of it's just habitual time killing. Just like, okay, got a bit of time to call, spark up a cigarette. Oh, okay, it's after lunchtime. There's, we got 24 beers, and actually there's only 4 of us in the band. That's way too many. Might as well crack on. I also personally request non-alcoholic things on the rider. I used to smash vodka shots before playing, but yes, ginger shots are now my thing, because that just gives me, what that represented. It wasn't that I needed vodka before I played; is that I needed some sort of livener, some sort of little short, sharp, shake the head from hours and hours of waiting and waiting. Find your own route through it. I'm completely abstinent. That's me, but that may not be your route. Maybe you still smoke. Maybe you're going to just need to stop, or maybe you just need to reduce. Moderation is hard, in particular in what we do. But if you are going to moderate, there are loads of things you can do, including just not being around the rider all day. You also save yourself money if you get the promoter, etc., to reduce your rider. Like, look at how much you actually use and how much you actually drink. It's just like, oh, actually, maybe we only need 3 beers each or whatever, because you still probably have already loads in the van from the last gig and the last gig and the last gig. It saves you a lot of money as well if you try and reduce it. So reduce. But there's people like Music Support, which is a really great charity made by people in the music industry and the touring industry, who are great. They run courses, have loads of great advice, and even for people who are whose relatives or like family members or their loved ones are struggling with like alcohol, etc., who are in the industry, they also are starting to support those people as well. So Music Support UK, check them out if you're a musician, if you're struggling and trying to figure it out and maybe reduce what you're doing, or just have a talk to someone who knows. Check them out, and you can also DM me as well. I'll have a chat.
Amazing. Thanks so much. Now, when it comes to your writing yourself, you mentioned earlier, I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember the exact phrase, but you said something about at some point you have to kind of hand over your music to someone else. At some point there is that kind of relationship. how does that sit with you, particularly from a production point of view? Because when you write your own songs, you become so attached to them, and in your head, often we have an idea of exactly how we want them to sound, and that might be different to what someone else thinks. So the first part of this question is, when you're self-producing, at what point do you go, I'm not touching this anymore? I've always found that really hard, and I know a lot of other musicians. Like, I look back at some recordings I've done, and they're like really great recordings, and honestly, man, there's like final V84, like version 84. Right?
Yeah.
So and I've now learned that actually you need to give that decision perhaps to someone else. But if you aren't even happy with that, how are you with that relationship about when the song? Because every time you probably listen back to a piece of your music, you probably think, I could have tweaked that a little bit, because you're just so close to it. How do you deal with that particular journey?
These days, I tend to co-produce everything with whoever. Like, I'm not the best engineer. Like, I can produce a record, but I need someone to actually run the session, because I can do stuff. I've done stuff at home, but it's just not to the level of the stuff that I really want to put out. So I tend to be in the room with someone co-producing stuff. So I don't necessarily hand things off then. And the benefit of doing that is that I've got someone else's ears in the room. And actually, my friend Charlie Morton in particular, who I co-produce quite a lot of my stuff with, his art is that even if I write something with somebody else, I would send music to just because I trust him as a person. I know he's just a dope dude. He's a great musician. He's got really good ears. And I think he'd give it me, like, honestly, like, that key change in the middle eight was a bit unnecessary, or, and also the feedback could also be like, that's great. Oh, you could push this even more. Actually, it seems a bit undercooked, I think the key is to find someone that, whose ears you kind of really rate. Because it can, I think it happened with, like, is it Brian Wilson? Like, that's an example of he's made some records where it's like an example of someone just like let loose and no one said no to anything. And it's just like some of the most bloated recordings you've ever heard. But he's also written some of the most amazing music ever put to wax. I'd give it to someone, find someone whose ears that you trust. And also being honest about what you can and can't do. I know I'm not, like, Charlie's put in just as many hours as I have playing, and he's also an amazing guitarist. But he's also put in the time in the actual production chops. So it's like, am I going to, just for the sake of having my name on everything, going to make a worse sounding record because I want complete total control on everything? Or can I collaborate with someone and make something better than what it would have been on my own? I think that's something to think about. Because other people are just the best resource that you possibly could have in this industry. Again, more so than any gear. Like, two people with a great idea and really bad gear can make something way, way, way better than you with a huge budget, just self-indulgent and going down a rabbit hole and not knowing when to stop.
That is a rabbit hole, and that is such a good answer and such good advice. Obviously, you've written songs for years now. Mm-hmm. If you look at the first song that you ever wrote, when you had that kind of blank slate in front of you, how is your approach at the very beginning now different to it was then?
So funny. I think I do remember my first song. It was on an electric guitar, unplugged. I didn't have an amp, and it wasn't tuned. But I managed some like power chords. I didn't have all its strings. And it was like quite a sort of Sum 41-y skate punky song. But I did not think about a single other person or anything. It was literally something like, I met this girl in high school. She had brown hair and green eyes. It was love at first sight. It was like that. I was just like, it was as honest as possible. That was direct from the soul. Now my process is a lot more, obviously there's like lots of life has happened, lots of pressures and lots of comparison and all these other things, imposter syndrome, etc. All of these things. So I sometimes have to fight a lot more to block those voices out. But again, in the right environment, around the right people, like when I'm with Johan and Self-Esteem, or if I'm in the room with my boy Charlie, I can just switch off and just sort of start playing some chords and just like close my eyes. Someone's recording invariably, and just start singing a melody and be like, well, that sounds like a song, and just like then just go from there. So I tend to try and be as instinctive as possible still to this day. I had a record deal when I was in my early 20s, and that was way more of, okay, 6 days a week going to like different songwriters and writing pop songs. Like, so that was way more like come in with lyrics, come in with like a song title, come in with, you know, some sort of beat or some sort of idea. And it's sort of like, we jobbed a bunch of songs, which was great, you know, came out with hundreds of tunes, but I got dropped. But now it's way more, obviously the craft comes a bit later, but I think I'm a bit freer with how the song starts. I don't really care how it starts. And it tends to just be somebody's playing something, it's like, oh, that sounds nice. Oh, let's get that down. And then press record. And then I start singing something. And it's like, okay, well, right, that sounds like a song. And then start taking words from whatever scratch vocal I just did and start, well, what could that mean? That's how my song A River happened when I was, me and Charlie and our friend E. Fernandez, we went out to Iceland. And Charlie had these chords. And it's like, put them down. I was like, all right, well, let's just press record and see what happens. And I just started singing, oh, there's a hole in your heart, a river. Da, 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 da. I was like, oh, there's a hole in your heart, a river. What's that? And then I just started writing, extrapolating what that could be. And it turned into this beautiful song about kind of loss and comfort. But yeah, I think if you kind of let yourself just go with the instinct as much as possible, even just to start with, that's not to say it just has to be free jazz, but I think that's where a lot of the juice is.
Great answer. And when you are writing, how do you said you block out voices around imposter syndrome and that kind of stuff, but how do you block out the voices around, we talked, you know, you touched upon earlier, and it's a subject we talk about a lot on StageLeft Podcast, which is internal versus external validation. Like when you're writing these songs and going to the studio, do you ever have in mind who is the desired listener for this, or who you're thinking will be listening to this? And if so, do you try and block that out, or do you embrace that?
No, but you know what? I probably should think about that maybe a bit more. Do you know what who I think about listening to it that I really shouldn't? That is a struggle for me. Is I think about, oh, what would Damon think of this? Oh, what would Self-Esteem think of this? Oh, what would Paloma think of this? Or any of, you know, my sort of turbo muso mates. That actually is one of the things that's held me back over the years. It's been up until last year when I released The River, it was 10 years since I released a song. And part of that was just because I was crippled by wanting to make music that my musician sort of friends and mentors would like, which is a terrible, terrible idea. So yeah, I wasn't thinking about an audience even. And I still don't think I do. I probably should a lot more. But the thing that I've actually had to really, really work on is block out thinking, oh, what would my musician friends or people that I know in the industry, what would they think? Oh no, they don't like that. Oh, maybe they're going to not like that. And it's like, the reason why these people are the people that I respect and that I love is that they didn't do that. They made the music that they like. And, you know, if they like my music, they like my music. If they don't, they don't. But that doesn't mean they don't like me. And I think it's hard to think like that. But that's a real thing that I've been chipping away at, like, for sure. But yeah, maybe if I should think about anyone, maybe I should think about an audience. But maybe not.
far be it from me to undo that amazing processing you did there, but like when you did kind of mention those people, I thought, oh, actually, that is quite a good way of like assuring the quality of what you want to be putting out, which is like, okay, these are the great artists, and so like, what would they think? But yeah, I guess the idea is,
I agree. That is potentially, I suppose it depends on how you use it. I was slave to it. So it was like, I couldn't finish a song, or I couldn't even play it to a mate because for fear of even them imaginarily hearing it. Do you know what I mean? It was like so insane. But thinking, oh, actually, this is the kind of quality of their work. This is the quality of their work. I would like to attain or aim for something in that realm. But which I think that's good. It's good to have maybe people to aspire to. Maybe that's what we're trying to say. But thinking about playing it to them and, whether they'd like it, I think it holds you back, probably.
As songwriters, we often are just opening ourselves up and giving something away to the rest of the world. And often we don't, yes, you might get some feedback by a certain percentage of people who might write in or, clap in an audience and that kind of thing. But I thought I'd just share something that you won't know, which is when I did a social media post about you appearing, a regular listener of the podcast for 8 years, a guy called John Meredith, who's actually a music university lecturer.
Nice.
He immediately replied just going, I saw this guy perform opening for Lana Del Rey, and I was so impressed. I was like, I can't forget this person's name. So the way he remembered you is that your first name is spelled Iles backwards. Yeah. And so like he was like, okay, right, I've got it. So he remembered, and he was super excited that you were appearing on this episode.
Wow, that's so cool.
which is really sweet, isn't it? And that was obviously a few years ago, and that was the Lana Del Rey support slot. Tell us about what
over 10 years.
There you go. Right. So it's that stuff sticks. So there'll be musicians listening to this who on their pathway up will be playing support slots. What makes doing support slots particularly unique, and because we all kind of dream as musicians that you're going to be playing to sold out arenas, that people singing back your own songs, but actually it's a very different gig, isn't it? How would you best navigate that if you're a young musician kind of doing support slots? Like, do you try and pick music that you think the audience are going to like, that's most like the headline artist, or do your own thing? Or how would you go about that? And any memories you've got of that incredible support slot with Lana Del Rey?
I haven't thought about that for a minute, so that's quite big up to, what was his name?
John Meredith.
Big up John Meredith, you're a G. A support slot is a completely different beast. And in some ways, actually, it can be such an opportunity because people don't know you. You can do whatever you want. Like when you're a headline act, you have to try and fit in the hits, if you have any, or the ones that people know, and then put the songs that you're currently promoting and try and make a balance with that. And, maybe if there's like old songs, you have to try and make them new, blah, blah, blah. There's all sorts of other things. And obviously the pressure to perform well, and if it's a sold out gig or whatever. Whereas no one knows you with a support slot. So try and do your most, the stuff you love the most, but also, you've only got half an hour or something. So you have to kind of just grab their attention. That doesn't necessarily mean just play absolute stonking bangers. Like, for example, that Lana Del Rey tour, she had full band. It was me and a guitar. That's all. I didn't have a band, So how can I was just like, oh, okay, how can I make this memorable? And at least one person, it worked. Thank you, John. That's really made my day. You have to think, and also because you're a support act, you have access to people. So after the gig, if you have any merch, going to the merch desk and selling to people, speaking to people, going around, because obviously there aren't the restrictions of you being the headline act and having to stay backstage before the show and all this stuff. You have the opportunity to make real fans. And I think it's actually one of the gifts that you can get, like getting on a good support tour. You don't have the pressure of having to sell any tickets. And actually, if anybody invites you on a support tour and demands that you sell X amount of tickets, I would run from that tour, like run for the hills. Some people do that, and it's like, that's not right. Really? But you have the opportunity to make fans, to connect with people, put your best 6 tunes together in your half an hour, whatever slot, and then go and connect. Take your acoustic guitar outside and play songs to people in the street. Do whatever you can, because you are free to do a lot more than you will. And then people remember you, be like, oh, well, that opening act was like interesting. I also think, do not play like it's your headline show. That's not what it's about. It's about respecting who's coming on after, who's invited you on. So making sure you're warming up the crowds, mention the people who are headlining, so they feel like you're part of it as well. Maybe so they feel like you're a fan as well, so you're connecting with them. I would also say it's not even about having loads of backing track and, bells and whistles. It's about smashing whatever tunes you've got as hard as you can. Also that you can set up as quickly as possible and tear down as quickly as possible, because you're going to have as little time as possible. So yeah, keep it tight, keep it simple, be direct as hell, and then interact with people. Interact.
And how does that compare to when you're playing, you mentioned earlier, like one below the headliner at a festival? I'd imagine it goes the other way, which is like artists would be like, okay, I'm going to prove to everyone why we should have been headlining. Right? Does it work like that or not so much?
It's funny. I mean, when Gorillaz are playing, I'm not afraid of anyone, like, with such a good band. So it's like, if we're not headlining a festival, I feel sorry for anybody playing after us. And when we're headlining a festival, I feel like we're there to show people why we're here. And I quite like that. It's a huge pressure, but it's, again, one hard earned. I've sort of done thousands and thousands of gigs, and so has everyone else on stage, and Damon even more so than any of us. So it's like, you look around you when you're at on a gig that big and in a band of that level, you can kind of feel confident in the lads and ladies to your left and right, and be like, okay, well, we all know, and not just actually on stage, the crew, even everyone from the crew to people doing merch, to our drivers, to the caterers, to, wardrobe, backstage, blah, blah, blah. It's like every single person here is top tier. So it's like, let's go out there and smash this. It's got its own benefits. And because of that, you're very well looked after, so that those 2 hours on stage, you're absolutely like on point. You're like a prize fighter. But yeah, it's a different pressure. It's a different kind of pressure. Like, it's almost like when you have something to prove, this is kind of a weird comparison, but like, like nuclear fusion versus nuclear fission. So the first atomic bombs were fission reactions. So it's when you split an atom apart, which creates a bit of energy. But what we're trying to work on is like fusion reactions, like fusing atoms together, which is what happens in the sun, which is like 10 million times more effective. And it's like, I actually think it's almost like the pressure of having to prove yourself is like so much more of a motivator than once you've, say, potentially you've proved yourself or something. It's harder to maintain like focus. It's harder to maintain like hunger at a high level than when you're on the way up and you have all these, like, no one expects anything from you and you're an underdog and you're constantly growing, you're constantly making new fans, you're making new friends, you're playing new places, etc. It's like really harness those years and that time and really get stuck in and like explore cities and explore people and talk to people, interact with people, and really, really dig in, because the returns reduce. Like, you might make more money, but in terms of the actual, I don't know, depth of connection with people and the ability to talk, to just like get on the floor and like interact with people, reduces as things get bigger. Yeah, I listen to history podcasts and like science podcasts every night when I go to sleep. So that's why that came up.
I love it. I asked this question to Mike, and I'll be interested to see which. So Mike, as mentioned to the listeners, plays with the Gorillaz and coordinates a lot of the technical stuff. And I wonder what your answer is to this. What is something that a musician would learn from working with Damon that they might not learn from working with anyone else?
you will see firsthand the power of putting great people in a room together, like picking the right people. And that's from like management to front of house engineer to, obviously singers and guitarists and other musicians. His superpower is just collaborating endlessly with people. And he's obviously arguably the greatest songwriter of his generation, and not just songwriter in like pop charts, but like the unbelievable breadth of scope of different things, from operas to different bands to just different kinds of just sonic projects. It's unbelievable. And that comes with a certain kind of confidence, but it also comes with a certain kind of like humility to get into rooms with different people who can do things that you can't do, and then orchestrating that all together around yourself. Like, he's unbelievable at putting people, regardless of where they come from, what they look like, what language they speak. It's just like, if you're great, you're great. Doesn't matter, doesn't care. It's just like, get near me. I want to be around that. He still loves just being around music being created in a fresh way. He's also, allergic to doing the same thing twice. So it's like, you can just see when he's in a room with like people and cool stuff's happening. It's just like, I feel like I'm in practice room 2 after school with my boys, like just discovering and like drop D tuning. It just like feels like that. There's just this beautiful enthusiasm, and that, that will come from, being around, trying to be around different people. I think that's one of the biggest things that anyone can take away is like, if you want to grow as a musician, try and work with new people, collaborate with people. You may have your main band, but if like, say you got a bit of time to work on a interesting electronic project or something, like maybe link up with someone online and like try doing that. And then maybe do an acoustic project with someone else. And it's like, it's all about being fed from as many sources as possible.
That's an incredible answer. And thank you for like aligning that to what someone on the uprising in their career could do. That's such a great answer. Thank you. When playing those shows with Gorillaz, I always feel when I see those, like technically there's so much that could go wrong.
Yeah.
Does it ever go wrong? And
yeah.
And so what do you do? Like, do you ever prepare and sit down as a group and go, okay, this is what we're going to do if things go wrong? Or if not, how do you deal with it? Like, because there's so many things that go wrong with like the images and, everything.
Yeah. I think you just can't take yourself too seriously. That's actually one of my favorite things. Obviously it's everybody is, again, really, really great at what they do. We all care very much. We all prepare really, really hard. And, I know hundreds of Gorillaz songs. It's like, we know a lot. We put a lot of time into making sure that actually we very, very rarely play the same gig twice. It's like, it's a lot of work, and obviously the amazing visuals and crew, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, we're all human as well. And like, I make mistakes, Damon makes mistakes, Mike makes mistakes. It's as long as the ratio is like, as long as it's rare, but technical stuff does happen. We perform with click, like not, and that's not necessarily to say that we have to have that we use backing track for every song. We have quite a big band, so it actually can represent a lot of stuff live. We have 3 drummers. But because of the visuals, everything has to be time coded. But sometimes, if just the moment takes and like Damon goes off on one, blah, blah, and we're out of sync. It's like, all right, we're just out of sync now. Or like, there's been times where we've gone out of time with the backing track because just like the vibes are too good on stage, like, or you're in a festival and, just somebody starts a song, but Dee's still in the crowd or something and misses a cue, or I, slip over because it's raining. It's like, and there's a big like fart on the bass. Like, my first note of our first set at Coachella, my tuning pedal was on. Like, I'm sometimes over cautious about making sort of peripheral noise. So like, I make sure my tuning pedal's on till the last second. But I was just so up for it, I forgot to turn. Like, no one would notice. In my ears, obviously, it sounded horrendous, but. These things happen, and I pray that anyone listening to this who ends up in big bands manages to be in a band with people who can sort of not take themselves all that like so seriously. I think it would be a different thing if we were like in a super pop band that was like just a product that has to be exactly the same all the time. And but thankfully, it's at the end of the day, it should be fun. And you're a human person. You are allowed a mistake at the highest level. There's absolutely no gig, no performer anywhere on this planet that is perfect every night. Don't worry about it. You will make the difference between a professional and an amateur is a professional's made just as many, if not more, mistakes, but they just happen less. They've happened before. There's happened. They make fewer in public, way fewer in public. There might be the odd one, but that's it. Don't worry, they happen.
Isn't that an interesting answer, given that in other eras you had, like, as much as I love him, but like James Brown famously used to fine people for hitting bum notes and stuff like that. So,
yeah, but I bet you'll find, unfortunately, James Brown also did. And I bet actually when he was like, oh, you guys weren't in time, it's like, actually, I think your drummer's a better timekeeper than you. But, but you maybe accelerated on one hit and everybody couldn't catch that because they weren't in view, So of course you're the band leader. You have to take those. That's the hierarchy, that those things happen as well. But even James Brown, even Prince, even Michael Jackson, or whoever, Stevie Wonder, whoever you want to name, every single performer ever has made and makes mistakes.
4 words for you: youth of the apocalypse. So for listeners who don't know, there was this incredibly exciting, I'd almost say like a guerrilla marketing campaign, and guerrilla, I mean GUERR, whatever it is, RILLA. For this, with this really exciting project, which you were at the heart of, that involved a lot of very young, exciting musicians and a couple of legends. And I remember at the time just going, oh, like it was such an effective marketing campaign, because I was like, I remember messaging Jim Sharrock, whose cousin played with you, Jay Sharrock, and Jim is the drummer of the Lightning Seeds. And I was like, this looks great, doesn't it? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, what is it? And he's like, I don't know. It just looks so great. Like, we hadn't heard any music yet, and it was like so exciting. What happened with the Youth of the Apocalypse? Because that just looked like that was going to blow up to be something exactly like so huge, and it ended very, very quickly. Yeah,
I mean, and that I must say that was Jeff Wooten, guitarist for Gorillaz and just amazing guitarist. It was his project. Him and Jamie Reynolds, Claxons, they started making this music together, and then they brought me and Jay in, and then we brought Tricky Garcia and young Lazarus MC, and it was this beautiful kind of chaotic, really fun kind of. I don't know. It was really cool. It's sort of like Gorillaz meets Kasabian kind of like things. It was really, really cool. But unfortunately, I think it just came at a bit of a time in our lives that I don't think it was the right time. We all kind of just like needed to step away from it because it. And basically, I mean, I ended up in rehab, so it's like we all kind of needed. We all had our different things. Everybody had different projects as well. And we just couldn't keep it together, I don't think. But there's still music, and who knows what's going to happen with that. But it's unfortunate that it didn't work out. But I actually am quite glad, because I think it might have like sort of gone nuclear, and like sort of we potentially not be friends. No, I mean, but all I can speak for is for myself, and I needed to step back from it. So I just wasn't ready for more chaos. My life was already a bit mad.
Yeah. 3 more questions.
Okay.
Paloma Faith, you have a tattoo. Tell us why.
Paloma is one of the great loves of my life. I met her when I was 19, started playing with her. We started playing just like, Hoxton Bar and like clubs in Soho. The Black Gardenia, we used to play quite a lot. That's closed down now. Pigalle Club and... it was, I don't know, there's some people that you just meet and like, we are kind of like very similar people. Like it's quite deep. I don't even know how to describe it, but kind of when I walked into the audition room, when I auditioned for a band, I sort of like saw her, I was just like, well, we're going to get on. And I don't even think I think I auditioned for bass. And I don't think it was really working, but I'd learned the guitar parts because I just liked the tune so much. And she needed a guitar player to play with the next person coming in to audition on bass because they didn't have a guitarist coming in or something. So I was like, well, I can play guitar. And we just like, as soon as we started playing, it turned into a gig. And I was on my knees in front of her. She was like, ah. So I cut my teeth in that band. We did, it was my first sort of like experience of, I think, doing like a proper like tour, but also like doing like fly dates to Europe and promo and random acoustic sessions at festivals. And so we went from playing to like small clubs to like, I think, Shepherd's Bush or Hammersmith in a couple years or something. And then, I stopped working with her after the first album, but I still love her dearly. She's still a really good friend. I saw her actually a couple of weeks ago in Brighton. And she'll forever be one of my favorite people. And she's also a true artist in that she also is kind of in her head a bit about, what will people think and, all of this stuff, but goes past those, plows through those feelings and all the risk and all this stuff. And is always true to who she is. And she's just so cool, if you ask me.
And what is the tattoo?
It's a dove. So Paloma means dove. And she's got 3 doves tattooed on her. And I took the dove from her first album's artwork and got that tattooed on my neck.
Amazing. If I gave you the power to watch one gig you've ever played from the perspective of the audience, the whole gig from start to end, what one would you choose?
Royal Albert Hall, 2014, I think it was. Damon Albarn and the Heavy Seas. We did 2 nights at Royal Albert Hall, and I think they might be the best shows you've ever done. They were unbelievable. Just everybody was just on fire that night. Absolutely everyone. Perfect song choice, perfect crowd. It was just so good. Yeah, I think it was recorded. The audio was recorded, and actually, I think they burned CDs of the performance that night. And as people were leaving, they could pick them up.
Wow.
It was kind of mad. I don't even know how that's possible. But yeah, that I'm not sure if there's actual footage. I saw somebody's like phone footage recently, which was still pretty good. But yeah, that's the one.
Is it weird playing Royal Albert Hall when you've got people sat behind you?
Yeah. And it's not the only venue where that happens. In a lot of concert halls, actually, because I think choirs sit behind orchestras and stuff, so I think they open those seats up, and just also sonically they allow the rooms to breathe fully. It is strange, but I just turn around and I interact with them. It is weird, but it's also like it's kind of cool.
Nice. If I was to give you the power to be, say, president of the music industry for one day, what rule or law would you can only bring in one law or rule, what would you bring in?
Man, this is just the one. I think we need a few, but something like, and I'm not even sure what I'm really trying to get at, because I remember playing again this band when I was 16. We were called Autofed. My boys from Bromley. We played like Mean Fiddler, and I think at the Barfly in Camden. And I think we had to pay to play. It was like we had to like pay 400 quid or something, or like at least. Well, they gave us the tickets, and we had to go at least sell. We weren't going to make any money unless they made that money, or something like that. I'm just like, on the one hand, I kind of understand it's kind of good to have some sort of knowledge and like promoting a gig. But I feel like there should just be opportunities for people. Like if you're like, you're under 18, like a school kid, like you should be able to kind of play a gig for free at like a good venue. There should be like music education and music sort of like literacy in terms of like how the business works for young people, and they should have access to performance spaces. That's like really good. I think just the arts needs a lot of love right now, and I think getting young people, making it easier for young people to perform and young people to be involved and feel like they can have a voice is really important. I'm not even sure if that's a real answer, but that's how I feel.
It's an important one. What's in line for you this year?
So I've got a couple solo shows. I've got a So Far show coming up at the end of May, and I'm playing on like in the alternative Great Escape on the 18th of May as well, a little solo show. This summer I'm going to be out in Japan with a singer called Hikaru Utada, playing in her band. So that's a Japanese sort of arena tour, which would be pretty amazing. And then later in the year, hopefully an album out. I've got sort of the songs, I think, or near enough the songs. So kind of working out how I'm going to release that. I don't really know how I'm going to do that, but I don't really have a team, and I think I want to do it right. So I'm going to sort of take my time. And there's also another thing. Actually, I'm not sure if I can announce that. There'll be other gigs. There's other cool stuff.
Well, listen, thank you for appearing on the StageLeft podcast and, giving us your wisdom and your insight and your vulnerability and like some really practical advice for young musicians and emerging musicians of all ages entering the music industry. Good luck with all the projects coming up, and thanks for being, again, such a great guest on the StageLeft podcast.
Mate, no worries. Thank you for having me. And by the way, just in case anybody misconstrues that, it's got nothing to do with Gorillaz or anything. That's not what I'm... It's something else, but I just can't talk about it yet either.
The internet was just about to explode.
I know, but I know what Gorillaz fans are like, and it's like, just trust, it's not that.